kind of referring to this as like a comfort classic. It's clearly Italian based, but leaning towards more of the vegetable and whole wheat variety, a lot more homemade stuff. That's why I wanted to make our own sauce, try to keep a lot of the extra sugar and extra added things out of it, which kind of makes Italian food not so bad for us. All Italian food is delicious, and in moderation. Pasta is wonderful, but like making choices and not eating it every day is always something probably Amy would recommend. Want to get right down into it, and we'll fill in all the details as we go along. I didn't send a recipe for the sausages. I'm going to show the method for that right now. There's also not like a specific recipe for the roasting of the vegetables. I'm going to walk us through the prep and method for that. Otherwise, we will be making the sauce, the croutons, and the dressing, hopefully all in this session. So we're going to get right into it. If you don't prep all of this right now, or you don't finish all of it in the hour, I probably won't finish all of it in just the hour, but wanted to impart the most important of the methods and just show you how much you can get done and how many different ways we can talk about and think about that we can use all these different fun things. I am not going to be cooking off the pasta for this class. It is literally follow the instructions on the package, and that I would like to talk about while we're making other things, because there's lots of different choices you can make when buying a pasta, and so Amy can maybe fill us in on some of the better options for that kind of stuff. I recommended getting a whole wheat pasta, and so if that's what you got, I cook as many servings as you might want for the week, according to what the package recommends. But I know even there's probably some more fun and more interesting choices than just whole wheat pasta, so we'll talk about that too. First thing I'm going to do is start searing off sausages, because I want to get those in the oven. Then I'm going to cut some vegetables because I want to get those into the oven. While things are in the oven, we'll make some of our other quicker prep items like the dressing and the sauce. So the sausages I have are spicy Italian because that's what I like. You get what you like. It's very dependent on personal preference. There's a lot of plant-based sausages on the market now from different companies that even have like Italian kind of flavorings, like sun-dried tomato, basil, sausages and stuff. Amy, have you tried any of those?
Yeah, there's a lot of options. In fact, I have some plant-based in my refrigerator. And so really, I would just encourage people to look at food labels, right? All of these have food labels. And if there's particular nutrition concerns that you have, maybe watching saturated fats, or maybe you really, don't want a lot of processing or a lot of sodium, take a look at the label, because there's many varieties available. The turkey sausage, you can get Italian turkey sausage, which is lower in calories and quite a bit lower in total and saturated fat than like a pork-based type of sausage. Tofurkey makes one that's actually also, I think, really tasty. It's actually pretty high in fat, though, much less so in saturated fat. But and then Beyond Sausage, these Beyond Burgers now have Italian sausages out there. Trader Joe's has a really very tasty sausageless sausage. So, and it's got 1 gram of saturated fat compared to like 8 grams of saturated fat with the pork-based sausage. So try out some varieties. And I think as far as health goes, certainly even the high-fat regular pork sausage can fit into a healthy diet. You're not eating 4 sausage links in a meal. You're eating maybe 1. Right. And so keep that in mind as well. But if you are looking for healthier alternatives, they're definitely out there.
Awesome. Really good to know. And I want to point out, I don't know if you're someone like me, I don't even eat a whole one in one serving. That's why I called it seared and sliced. What we're going to do is sear it and finish it in the oven. That's why I'm using my handy dandy cast iron, because I can go right from the stovetop into the oven with it. So I'm searing it on at least both sides. I know it's like a round object, but it's hard to get it to stand up on the other ends. But at least on both sides, we're going to try to get a good hard sear that just gives this extra flavor anytime we can caramelize something before throwing it into the oven. I don't know, it's going to make it just kind of taste a little bit crispier on the edges, which is nice. So after it's cooked, though, I'm going to slice it into nice kind of 1/2 inch thick, long, biased, diagonal slices so that I have portions ready to go. Then throughout the week, I probably will only eat about a half to 3/4 of a sausage, like per serving or sit down. And some days I won't even eat the meat. Some days it's just going to be all veggies and pasta. There's a lot of different mixes you can make. If this is enough sausage for like a family of 4 to eat throughout the week. I think if you divide it up properly and you're not eating it every single day, but you have it prepped out for various things. You can put it in sandwiches or wrap straight on top of like a Caesar salad. It's like whatever sausage you're using, these are different ways that you can use it. So I've got my skillet on high, very high, and I'm going to just sear both sides before it goes into the oven. I want to make sure that I'm getting a good, nice, crispy brown color on both sides. Yeah. It's just going to make it the texture crispy and nice once it's finished. This one didn't get as brown, but that's all right. So I'm not going to sear this side as long as I did that side because it's going to go into the oven and continue cooking on this side. So it will finish its searing process a little bit in the oven. My oven is set to 425 because I'm going to roast my vegetables at that temperature also, and so it works to finish both. Then once the sausages are done, I'm going to let them cool down and then slice them and put them away. Great on top of the pasta, lots of different uses for the whatever sausages you're using. It's even really good as like a little pizza bread topping you could make throughout the week if you've got extra of that whole wheat bread. You bought some for croutons. A lot of
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, such a good idea to put it in with your breakfast, especially those plant-based ones. There's a lot of different delicious plant-based things on the market these days, so many more. When I was a kid, it was pretty much Morningstar. Mm-hmm. And then like tofu stuff started coming around, and then now
a lot of them now are pea protein. Yeah. So it's a good source of protein. Some of these even have fiber, and sometimes it's difficult for people to find sources of protein for breakfast other than eggs. So some of these might be options.
Really good point. People ask that all the time. I get sick of eggs. What else can I have with protein? All right. So we're going to prep out some of our veggies to go into the oven. I've got a bowl here. I'm going to toss it in with some olive oil and flavor, and then sheet pan lined with foil just to help cleanup be a little bit easier. Those sausages are really sizzling up. They're going to get nice and juicy. I'm using bell peppers, zucchini, and mushrooms. I also am just going to add in some onion and garlic because we're using that in a lot of the other things we're making. It's not going to be bad to have onion and garlic. That makes everything taste better, in my opinion, when you're cooking things together. I got green bell peppers because the red were very expensive today, so I just went with green. And the zucchini, actually one of these is from the garden. I grew this myself. Very exciting. So these grow very easily. If you even have a tiny bit, they thrive in Southern California. If you have a little square foot of land, you can plant a zucchini. And
I have zucchinis coming out of my ears right now. I've been making zucchini bread and zucchini rounds and
it's very fun. I love
noodles and
you can roast it, cook it. It's great raw in salads, just zucchini all summer long. Bell pepper, I find the easiest for me to cut them. I just cut it off the sides. So I find where the center stem is, and I just go down the wall, bringing it all the way into the center, so I'm not losing any of that bottom. But I'm just kind of cutting around the seed core, taking off as much of the inner, this white, the connective part that connects the seeds to the outer wall. It gets kind of bitter, especially on these green bell peppers, which are not ripe. That's why they're green. They get a little bit more bitter, so I take that out, but it's not necessary. And I'm just cutting down the walls. Once I have my planks, my walls cut, I'm just going to cut these into strips. I don't want to cut them too small because I want to have sort of a solid structure that holds up for more days throughout the week. The smaller I cut it, the more broken down it gets in the roasting process, and therefore the less time it will last. So I'm just going to cut them into about 1/2 inch thick or wide strips, like maybe you would for a veggie platter tray. I tend to hold the bell pepper with my thumb and fork and fingers, but in that claw formation so that I'm still protecting myself. But by holding it that way, it's not going to move around on me because it's not a very flat object. So I just actually like pinch it, slice down into my strips, and then, move on. Keep your fingers safe, always.
Most people don't realize that bell peppers are one of the best sources of vitamin C. We often think of citrus fruits like oranges, but bell peppers are a great source of vitamin C. Also contain some potassium and some other nutrients like vitamin K and E, those high antioxidants.
Wow, that's awesome. This is going to be packed with it. I can tell already. I'm excited. All right, I'm going to cut the onion. I think a lot of you have seen me do this, but for this, I'm going to go ahead and cut both ends off because I'm just going to cut this into wedges that I want to kind of caramelize and roast up nicely. I don't need the root because I'm not trying to keep it in a dice. I'm going to just cut it into julienne strips. So I cut both ends off. Then I'm going to remove that outer papery layer, as many layers as you need to get down to where the onion is no longer kind of papery or inedible. So I'm going to follow the lines around the onion, but skip a few. I'm going to cut them into kind of small, thin wedges all the way around. It's about a centimeter, quarter of an inch. It's going to give me a really nice strip of onion, which is going to caramelize and roast up nicely.
Onions are also a good source of vitamin C.
Oh, yeah.
And antioxidants. And no real sodium fats, right? So add a lot of flavor to what you're eating.
Especially this combination, we're going to add some garlic, just whole smashed garlic cloves. The combination to me of onion, garlic, and either a little bit of butter or a little bit of oil, it doesn't really matter, cooked out, and that you don't get much better than that.
And Julia, do you have a preference when it comes to onions, like white, yellow,
my preference is white, just because I think they're a little sweeter and I like the flavor, but it really does depend on what you're doing. Yellow onions are delicious and great, and then they're usually the cheaper of the varieties. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with just using yellow most of the time. They all do have distinct differences in flavor though. So that's why I like white, because they are a little bit sweeter, a little bit less biting. So if that's something that like you find onions are just a little too sharp for you, then maybe try a good like sweet white onion and put it in your fridge. That actually helps sweeten onions up. I learned that from an old Southern cook. Then red onions I really like for certain things that you want that like kind of sharp, but at the same time really flavorful onion flavor, like salsas and things that you're going to eat fresh. That kind of thing I tend to use red onions for. Just again, a personal preference on it. I like the flavor of it. So yellow onions are kind of your like fundamental, just hearty onion. It'll work for a lot of different recipes and grows well, and just good basic onion flavor. So if that's what you have, then that'll work in almost any recipe, unless it's specifically supposed to be super sweet onion. So I just kind of smashed that up and broke that up into different pieces. I'm going to throw that in. The zucchini, I don't know if everyone knows this, the stem is technically edible, as is the flower that was once attached to it, that it grew from. All of it is edible. So I'm going to cut just the ends off that were kind of dried up and dirty, and leave that because it's part of it, and I'm sure has some of the nutrition in it, right?
I didn't know you could eat the stem and the flowers.
Yeah. Oh, zucchini flowers, squash blossoms are wonderful. You don't have to fry them, but if you stuff them with ricotta cheese and garlic and other delicious stuff, Parmesan, and then like you can bake them. They're nice if they're lightly breaded in like a Parmesan breadcrumb, but they don't have to be fried. You can bake them. They're phenomenal Try them when you see them on a menu. They're really, really good. Okay, for these, I'm just going to cut really quickly in the middle. I try to get my knife down onto the board safely first and then drag it through and then slice down. That's how you can safely slice long objects. Get your knife in first, down to the board, drag it through, and down. Always watching where your other fingers are. Then once you have a flat surface, it's much easier to cut things. I'm going to cut these into what we call crazy cuts, or a technical term is oblong. So you go one angle, then the other angle. And you move the object you're cutting, not yourself or the knife. That would be awkward. So you just kind of push it back and forth, cutting into this fun oblong shape. And that's just because it makes it more interesting. It's something different. It's also a nice big chunky piece that's going to roast up really well, but still have some substance to it. Zucchini can get slimy because it's really, really watery. So you want to make sure that I don't want to like reduce it to nothing before we start. And a nice fun crazy cut, fun back and forth. Also, I know I've said it before, but making your food more fun to look at makes it more exciting to eat. Tricking our brains is what it's all about. So mushrooms are last. I wanted to point out these mushrooms I already cleaned. Some of the stems came off because they didn't really seem right to me, but I leave the stems on. It's really good flavor. And they're going to just roast up nice and small anyway. I don't wash mushrooms in pools of water unless absolutely necessary. They get slimy and they're very hard to then dry up to where we want them to be to roast. I use a damp paper towel and I wipe all of them down. If some of them are extra muddy, then I rinse it under running water, and really, really, really shake it off and dry. But the more the wetter they get, the slimier your mushrooms are going to be in the inevitable cooking process. Okay, because they will absorb a lot of the water. So the recommended, you can use a lot of water and then maybe spin them dry. I find that kind of bruises them, so you want to cook them right away if you do that. But a wet paper towel or a wet rag, and you just wipe the dirt off, and they're good to go. Any of the big ones, I'm just going to cut in half. I want them to stay, like I said, kind of substantial, like the other veggies. I also don't want them to cook much faster than everything else. Mushrooms have a lot of water content, like the zucchini, and they'll roast up pretty quickly.
Julia, how would you cut portobello for this?
For the large portobello, the big ones, so first you want to take the gills out. So you take like a spoon and you scrape the inside gills out, the black gills. Just kind of scrape as much of that away with a spoon, the edge of a spoon, as you can. And then I would cut it into maybe 1/2-inch strips across one length of the mushroom, and then cut those into about 1/2-inch chunks.
Great, thank
big
you.
Portobellos. They're nice and meaty. I've actually done like a lasagna where you put those down. A lot of flavor, but also just a real hardiness to it. And if you've tuned in before, you may already know this, but mushrooms can actually produce vitamin D when exposed, when their gills are exposed to the sun, just like our skin does. And so you can actually look in the store for UV treated mushrooms to get higher levels of vitamin D, or you can just put them out in the sun with the gills up and let them sit in the sun for about 10 minutes, and that will increase the amount of vitamin D in the mushrooms.
I love that so much. I tell everybody that now that I've learned that. I think that's one of the coolest things ever.
There really aren't that many foods that have vitamin D.
No, it's really
in fact,
like
most of the ones that we think about, like milk, it's really fortified with vitamin D.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm using a little bit of the dried oregano that is called for later on in our sauce, and some red pepper flakes. I know that they're going to go well together. I know they're going to go well with my veggies. And then I know that they're going to, like, if I tie in a little bit of the flavors from some of my other meal prep, then it all goes together nicely when you start mixing and matching throughout the week. That was about a tablespoon of olive oil, and I'm just going to toss this up together with my hands. Best tool you have. Make sure that everything is kind of nice and shiny and well coated, but not swimming necessarily. I don't want to waste my extra virgin olive oil, canola oil blend, but I also don't want to add too much extra fat that it doesn't need it. Look at this, I'm just throwing vegetables all over the place. Should use a slightly bigger bowl. I'm also a little short, so I have to stand on my a little short. Listen to me, I'm very short. So I have to stand on my tippy toes to get the leverage that most people have on these counters. They're a little high. So, enough. Okay, struggles of a short person. I am done with this. I'm gonna put this in the oven on my sheet pan with oil. I'm gonna sprinkle a little bit of salt and pepper over it now once it's laid out, just because then I can kind of evenly disperse it but not add too much, because we're getting a lot of really good flavor from the vegetables themselves mostly, because they're delicious. It's summer and they're ripe in their glory, and then the oregano and the red pepper flakes that I added are really gonna bring out a lot. So I'm adding, this is about 1/8 of a teaspoon of kosher salt. And black pepper is really up to you. I know I've said that before, but that is so personal. You can put as much or as little as you want. Black pepper. You could put a ton more garlic. I'm using that fresh garlic on here, so I'm not putting garlic powder, but if you have garlic or onion powder instead of fresh, you can absolutely sprinkle some of that on instead. I would stick to under 1/4 teaspoon. So start with 1/8 of a teaspoon, which is about a pinch, and then go from there. I'm gonna throw this into the oven with those sausages on the middle rack. Everything's gonna roast up nicely. It's a good hot oven. The sausages aren't gonna take very much longer. I'm gonna check those in just a few minutes because we gave them a head start by searing them, and they cook pretty quickly, and the oven is very hot. So I'll check those in a minute, but we do wanna make sure that they're cooked through. If you're using any kind of raw meat, sausages especially, they need to be cooked to 155-degree internal temperature. The best way to know that, if you don't have a thermometer, is to slice one of them and make sure that it is 0 sign of pink or red, like if you're using turkey or traditional pork or chicken sausages, which are delicious too. Any of those you want to be really, really safe about. Plant-based, I would just say follow the instructions on the packages. They usually tell you how many minutes you want to go to for a fully cooked sausage.
One of the things I love about like this meal kind of pre-prep and planning is that now you have a whole sheet pan and there's so many ways you could use it. So maybe tonight you have pasta with the sausage, and maybe tomorrow night you make a little homemade pizza, right? You can even buy like whole wheat naan, which I like to use as pizza breads, or you can get your own dough. Trader Joe's, I know, has whole wheat dough that you can use, so you could make a pizza one day. You could bake some chicken and have those vegetables just as a side dish, or throw them in like a quinoa or some pearl couscous or something. So I think if you sit down kind of at the beginning of the week and plan out some ideas, and when you go to the store, you know, okay, I also need to get some naan, you know, or I need to get some chicken this week to go with this, or I'm going to make a quiche with some of these vegetables, right? So
good idea. All of these are such good ideas. My mom actually used to make a little frittata when I was a kid with marinara sauce on the bottom of the casserole dish, scrambled eggs with basil and like Italian veggies, and it baked on top with the sauce all bubbly on the bottom. It was the most incredible sort of like quick Monday night dinner. You could do that with all of these things. I haven't thought about that in years. Thanks, Amy. All right, I'm moving into the marinara sauce. This is very quick, very rustic, because it is just, you kind of throw it into a pot. You can let it simmer as long as you want to, technically, but it can be ready in like 20 minutes. I forgot to get a pot out. Sorry. Trying to avoid as many loud noises as possible. Okay.
So Julia, we have a quick question about the veggie sausage. Would you recommend that they also bake that in the oven or just stovetop?
I think it really depends on which one that you're using. I know that I've had experience with, I forget what brand it is, but it's a sun-dried tomato and basil vegan sausage. You get it in the refrigerator case. It's like 5 to a pack. They're kind of small, but really delicious. I seared it first, and then I finished it in the oven just because I like that kind of flavor. It added a little bit of extra sort of crispiness and flavor to it, but I think that like it's made with fully cooked ingredients most of the time. So it's really about getting a sear on it, and then you're probably pretty much done. You know, and then slicing it, and then depending on how you're going to use it throughout the week, you might reheat it, you might then slice it and sear it, or put it on a pizza, or do different things with it. But it really depends on the brand or what it's made out of, depending on if it's like one of those vegetable proteins or tofu or like a tempeh product. You know, there's a lot of different things that I don't know. I don't want to tell you one definitive answer for that. Okay, we are heating this medium pot over medium heat. We're gonna ha-ha the pan, even when you're kind of doing this sort of light sauteing. I want to get the pan a little bit warm before I add my oil, and then I want to get the oil a little bit warm before I add in my garlic and onion, which we're going to chop up real quick while this is getting warm. So I'm going to keep this actually on a low heat. This is about a tablespoon, 2 teaspoons. Tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. That was about a tablespoon. I might have gone a little extra. Okay, so we want onion and garlic for this also. You can chop it as fine, as large, as whatever as you like. I'm going to grate the garlic because I use that little microplane, and it gets the flavor really, 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 really well blended into the sauce when it is almost in that paste, liquefied paste form. And I'm going to chop the onion pretty small in a mince so that in the end the sauce is mostly tomato with flavor, not tomato with chunks of onion and garlic in it. I'm only using 1/4 of this onion, so I'm going to cut it in half directly through the middle, and then again in half, and just use 1/4 of the onion. This is a math class. Okay. Take off that outer layer, saving all of these things because I'm going to make a veggie stock this week. Okay. I want to make sure that since I didn't cut off the ends of that onion, I want to make sure sometimes where the roots came out or where the stem grew from, it kind of is a little bit papery. And that's not really fun to eat when you get that in your food. So I'm going to just take that end off. That's all I was doing there. And then I'm going to cut this into strips. From the strips, like most things, I'm going to cut into long batons, or sticks, in the other direction. So I'm going to cross that cut, and then I'm going to dice through that really, really, really small. Try to get this as tiny minced up as I can. But that's just one method of doing it when you don't still have the root attached. Cut it into these little strips, and then just chop down finely, keeping the tip of your knife always on the cutting board so it's nice and safe. And whether your hands are helping to guide the onion into the middle or safely on top of the knife, most important thing is that you're aware of where your fingers are. Okay, nice and chopped. I'm just going back through these chopped onions over and over and over to make sure they're very, very, very finely minced and chopped. I don't want big onion chunks into the food. Okay. It's just going to go now right into the oil, which has been warming on low heat for a minute. I'm going to turn it up to medium. Oh yeah, it's already fragrant. Okay, I'm going to chop the garlic, and then I'll put the camera back over here where you can see. Let's see, you can put in as much garlic as you want. It's called rustic garlic marinara sauce. I'm using about 4 or 5 because the size of them are not always consistent. Okay, I want to smash them and get all the paper off. One of the more fun things to do. I don't want to smash them as much as I would normally because then I won't be able to grate them on the grater as easily. But that's okay. You can always chop them by hand. You can always use a garlic press. Just make sure that you scrape the garlic press out and get all that garlic. You don't want to waste any inside there. I know sometimes they don't squeeze it all the way out. I actually got my first garlic press recently. Still have not tried it.
It seems to, yeah, I like your point about scraping it out because it seems like most of it gets stuck inside. Not a whole lot comes out.
It doesn't seem to do the one job that it's supposed to do. Like, you have one job, right? And I am also kind of, I don't really think that that makes sense, having something in your kitchen that only does one job, when you probably have something else that would do it just as well, like this knife or a mortar and pestle or a food processor or a microplane, which is what I'm going to use this time, just to get that sort of nice, mild garlic flavor. It kind of just helps soften it up, that sharpness of raw garlic. Plus, then again, it's like the onion. Then I won't be left with really big chunks of anything in my tomato sauce. So it's a nice sort of rustic tomato sauce. I'm going to move the camera back. Excuse me. Just so that we're focused here now. These are sweating out, but not browning yet. I want to get the garlic in there so that this gets nice and flavorful together. So the microplane, you want to hold it strongly from one side and you're scraping away from you if you can help it. Usually the best option. Wearing like a safety glove or a glove for this, some people like, because these can scrape you if you let yourself become unaware of what you're doing. I'm just doing it right over the pot so that I can tap it in there if it even wants to come out. Lots of garlic. This was a big clove.
Yeah, garlic is one of those fantastic ingredients that seems to help to reduce cholesterol or blood pressure, fight against inflammation. So if you like a lot of garlic, throw a lot of it in there.
Especially because then throughout the week, this sauce can be more than just like a sauce to put on stuff, although I really like sometimes just using those, some of that rustic bread and dipping it in, or then like I said, you can use it as a base for a frittata, as a marinade, or a sauce for some of that nice baked chicken you could do throughout the week if you have any.
You have more, you could get some eggplant and do like a ratatouille.
Any vegetable would work on that tray of roasted vegetables, by the way. You don't have to stick with just that sort of Italian-themed variety either, but yeah, eggplant would be a great addition if you wanted to add into that. You could use a lot more fresh herbs, obviously, which would go really well with all these things. We have some basil we're going to throw into this sauce and a lot of other stuff. I want to get these last bits of garlic in here, and then I'm going to get those sausages out. I can smell them. I want to check them.
The nice thing too is this recipe doesn't have added sugar. It can be hard to find a spaghetti sauce without sugar, right? Well, tomatoes have sugar, so that's where the new food label is going to come in handy, because you'll be able to see how much of the sugar on the label is from the tomatoes and how much did they add into it, right, with added sugar.
Yeah, it is actually kind of, sorry, the camera's going to rock a little. It is kind of traditional to add a little bit of sugar. I mean, a lot of like little Italian grandmothers say that that's their secret thing, a tiny bit of sugar into their spaghetti sauce. But this isn't necessarily a traditional spaghetti sauce either. We're not going for that kind of more thick, coats the noodles kind of a thing. This is a rustic marinara sauce, which so I was taking the last bits of that garlic and just chopping it up a little bit, just because once you get close to the end of the garlic and your fingers are in danger of being scraped on the microplane, it's better to use your knife and chop up those last little ends a little bit. Scrape off that garlic paste into the thing. So this one doesn't have any of that added sugar. We are going to be adding basil, which also, in addition to the natural sugars in the tomatoes, the basil brings out like a really natural sweetness in itself and in other things. So there's a good amount of flavor that you don't need to add sugar to everything to make it taste good. Okay, the onion's got a little bit caramelized, and that's going to be so much good extra flavor. That is not a bad thing. we are gonna wet it out, add the crushed tomatoes, bay leaf, oregano, chopped basil with stems, and then salt and pepper. And if you're using chili flakes, also very personal. If you don't want it to be spicy, you don't add any at all. If you want a little spice, tiny pinch, a lot of spice, go to town. I'm using dried oregano for this recipe because dried oregano is actually a little bit stronger in flavor. You would have to add a lot of fresh oregano to get the amount of oregano flavor that we're going to get by using dried, whereas basil has better flavor fresh. So that's the trade-off. Also, then we can use the stems to add in extra flavor and then just take those out at the end. So I'm adding in a teaspoon of dried oregano, 1 bay leaf. I'm using dried. If you have fresh bay leaves, that's awesome. Just make sure it's super clean. Let's put our tomatoes in. Yeah. Rinse that can out. Okay, this is gonna smell so good. What else do I need to? I have my bay leaf, oregano. Okay, so the basil, I'm gonna show you. Let that go. I have this on low now. Whenever I have tomato product in a pot on heat, I'm sure people have seen this happen before. It wants to spit and sputter and do all kinds of things. So put it on as low as possible, even while it's coming up to temperature, just to help make sure. Adding a little bit of spice now. Make sure it doesn't like splatter all over your stove top. A little bit extra. Okay, this can go back. That goes back. The basil, a 1/4 cup chopped basil is a lot of basil, but that's where like a lot of the flavor from this sauce comes from. So I'm going to chop up the majority of the large leaves on this one bunch of basil. But I'm going to keep the stems and just sort of toss them in as well. They have flavor, tons and tons of flavor. You don't really want to eat them, but putting them in your soups or your sauces, or you want to make broth, or even just letting it soak in your spa water for the day. Strawberry basil water is really fancy. Treat yourself to that. Nice. A lot of uses for it. Okay, so that whole bunch of the stems that I'm not going to use, I'm definitely going to make sure I take off this blue gross tie, and I'm going to cut off the very ends. These are going into the sauce. They'll just sort of soak up in there, and then they'll be easy to remove because I left them large. I'll just take them out with tongs when the sauce is done. The basil, what I do, you grab them all in a bunch, basically. You try to find like the biggest one. Let's see. There we go. Try to find a really big leaf of basil, the biggest one in the bunch, and then use it to kind of wrap the other leaves around. Can you kind of see that I'm doing that? It's sort of now like a bundle of basil leaves. Then you can just cut across it. And then cut across those cuts. I'm not going for really finely chopped basil. I like to be able to taste it and see it. You can chop it up as fine as you want. Oh no, sorry about that. Not fun to see happen. Okay. You can even use those like pre-chopped basil. You can use dried basil. You would just use, well, not a whole 1/4 cup of it, but.
So Julia, someone has a lot of fresh oregano. And so if they would like to use that, how would they make that adjustment for quantity?
I would just sort of double what I've asked for. I asked for a teaspoon, so just go for at least 2. If you wanted to have it really, really delicious, it wouldn't hurt to have a whole tablespoon, which would be 3 teaspoons of fresh basil. So pick the leaves and then give them a little bit of a rough chop just to kind of bruise them up. You know, it brings out some of the natural oils and flavors, and then throw that in. That would be fantastic instead of dried. Just use a little bit more because dried oregano is really, really pungent. So you can add a lot of fresh to equal the amount. Okay, so I've got lots of chopped basil in there, plus the basil stems, our crushed tomatoes, our onions and garlic, bay leaf, lots of stuff. That is just gonna simmer. Gonna simmer for a while. If you want it to be a little bit thinner, you can always add just water or like a vegetable stock. You can kind of play with that once it's done. You're gonna taste it, add any salt and pepper if you want, and then add any water if you want to sort of thin it out. Starting with it right like this though, so it can really just kind of cook down and get condensed in flavor is what I kind of want to let happen. So that's gonna simmer on the back burner for a while. We can move into croutons and dressing are the other two things on my list. The croutons are as simple as can be. It's cutting your bread into cubes and then tossing it with the other ingredients on the recipe. Oh yeah. Okay. Veggies, I'm going to spin the tray like I do. Make sure that everything is nice and evenly dispersed. Get a lot of good heat, but those need to keep going. All I'm looking for on the veggies, and I'll show you before we're done, is caramelization, that like water has cooked out. They look roasty and delicious. And I'll show you what that looks like, but the more you cook and the more you roast vegetables, you'll get a feel for what that, I know this looks crazy, right? Just brushing everything onto the floor. I sweep everything at the end. It just is more efficient than me trying to clean. It's sort of a kitchen thing. Sausages are definitely looking done. They have shrunk up in size. I'm going to show you one of them. We can cut into it. So you can also see that the casing, which is like the skin around the outside, has shrunk up. The ends have even come out a little bit, some of the sausage meat. I got very, very spicy sausages. So you can see that red coating on my cutting board is because that's the spicy hot pepper oil coming out, which is going to be really great. So I can see very clearly there is no pink, there's no blood. It is one solid tone of color cooked all the way through. You're looking for a firm texture, bounces back all the way around the sausage. And if you do have a thermometer, 155 is safe for ground meat. So these are done. That is how I'm going to slice them. I want to let them cool before I do this just because it's difficult to kind of hold it. But I'm going to slice them into, like I said, about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch thick long diagonal slice so that eventually I'm going to have a Tupperware full of wonderful sliced sausage ready to go for all of the amazing things that we've already talked about. Plus, I'm sure you guys can come up with a lot of fun ideas of what you can do with different sausages. I want to let those cool down. I'll get the croutons in a minute, I think. I kind of want to show the dressing first before we run out of time, if we do run out of time. The dressing is just a little bit, I think you guys are all very clever. The croutons, I'm using just regular sliced multi-grain bread. It's kind of a little thicker than sandwich bread, and so it'll make good croutons. Just cut it into cubes, toss it in a bowl, bake it on a sheet pan with foil or paper, and it's just, you're making toasted bread cubes. So I think that, yeah, we'll get to that if we need to get to that. The dressing, though, there's a couple different options you could have gotten. If you found anchovy paste, that's awesome. If you didn't, I hope you found anchovy fillets because that's how you can make traditional Caesar with the actual anchovy flavor. If you really, really don't want anchovy flavor or actual anchovies in your food, you can kind of fake the flavor with the Worcestershire, which has anchovies in it. If you're using Lee & Perrins traditional brand of Worcestershire sauce and it's not vegan, it has anchovies in it. There are non-brand name Worcestershire sauces, like I know the Smart & Final brand, and I think the Kroger brand do not have anchovies in them, so they are actually vegan Worcestershire sauces. But they still have a really, really savory flavor, so they add a lot to a homemade Caesar if you are trying to avoid the actual animal product. You can still do it, and then you can skip the Parmesan if you're totally vegan by making it with Nutritional Yeast, but then you have to make it with a vegan mayonnaise, like Vegenaise, so you can do a totally vegan version of this, and it is actually really delicious. I've done that in catering for years. So We are using today, though, Greek yogurt, anchovy paste, Dijon mustard. I do have the traditional Worcestershire sauce, Parmesan, and lemon. The reason that this is better for us and a slightly updated version of Caesar dressing is because we're using non-fat plain Greek yogurt as our base, which if you're going to use, you know, a dairy, this is a great alternative, right, Amy?
Yeah, I actually made this recipe the other night after I got your email because I usually make it with mayonnaise. And I was like, wow, Greek yogurt, this is awesome. It's going to be higher in protein. It's going to give me some calcium. It's going to be great probiotics and a whole lot less fat. So I was super excited to get the recipe.
Yay! I'm so glad you already made it. Okay. We are just going to mix it all in a bowl. You can put it in a food processor or a blender. That's definitely one way to do it. I just kind of want to do it in this bowl so you can see. If I put a big machine here, it would be more difficult for you to see. If you have a blender or a food processor, even easier. Throw it all into it, pulse it until it's ready to go, and you're done. Other than the garlic, I don't have to cut anything anyway, so I'm just going to mix it into this bowl really quickly because I found anchovy paste. If you found anchovy fillets, what you want to do is grind it up either in a food processor or a mortar and pestle or something where you can, on your cutting board, chop it and then smash it with your knife into a paste. You want to turn it into an anchovy paste, bones and all. You don't do anything, you just mash it all up, bones and everything. That's why they're so good for us. These little fish, the bones are edible. They're actually extremely sustainable. When we talk about eating meat, we really should be eating a lot more of like sardines and anchovies because it's a very sustainable kind of fish and they're very good for us, right?
Yeah, they've got protein. They have omega-3 fatty acids, selenium, niacin. Granted, we're eating, you know, in this dish, a very small quantity, right? So it's not like you're going to get a day's worth of your omega-3s, right? But if you do eat anchovies as a dish, you're certainly going to be getting a fair amount of nutrients, and it is sustainable. And also because they're a small little fish, we don't really worry about mercury like we do from the large fish. So that's a good thing too. You don't have to worry too much about mercury.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to incorporating those kinds of things into our human diet more often. And I know this is gross to some people, but delicious to others. Insects. It's the future of food. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of olive oil to this. So I've got 1 cup of Greek yogurt. It's just going to be 2 tablespoons of olive oil. 1/3 cup fresh lemon juice. That's estimated from 2 lemons, but that really determined like where you got your lemons. This lemon came from a tree in the backyard, and it is juicy. A lot of those fresh homemade lemons are a lot more juicy than the ones you get at the stores. So the measurement is really an estimate. You know, if you have those store lemons, the smaller ones, you probably need 2. But just juice it into a measuring cup and see what you get. Where did my measuring cup go? Okay, this is a 1/2 cup measure, so I'm just going to go a little under. I think I'll get what I want from this 1 lemon. This lemon tree has been producing lemons since before I was born, and it blooms 3 times a year, I think. Southern California is amazing. It's a dwarf too. You can have a citrus tree in a pot on your patio. Get one of the dwarf varieties, and you can grow citrus pretty easily in California. Okay, so I've got my lemon juice that's going in. So good. Else, Dijon, 2 tablespoons. Have the squeezy variety, just I like it on my sandwiches. Making sure to stir the tomato sauce. It's starting to heat up, and I could hear it starting to bubble. Just don't want tomato to spit all over the kitchen. It will start to do that if it gets too hot. Dijon, 2 tablespoons. 1, 2. 1 garlic clove grated. I'm just gonna mince it up really quickly. It might be faster. No, I will grate it. It will be better flavor. So I'm just going to take the paper off, grate it up nicely on that microplane. You can do this with squeezy tube garlic or minced garlic or the chopped garlic in a jar. Or again, get that garlic press. That's okay. Maybe should I try it?
Sure.
Do you guys want to? All right, let's try the garlic press. Paper off.
So I know this isn't an issue that a lot of people have, but maybe you have elderly parents, or maybe you have a young child that's super active and it's hard to keep weight on them or put weight on them. And so some of the things that we did today, like the olive oil in the dressing or the olive oil in the marinara sauce, or even on the vegetables, you can really increase the amount of olive oil that you're using to boost the calorie level up for people who need more calories. And it's not going to increase the volume of food that they need to eat, but it's going to add, and it is a healthy fat, but there's 120 calories per tablespoon. So adding oil is a very sneaky way to get more calories in the diet in a healthy way.
Okay, so I got a good amount of garlic that squeezed out of there, but then this is what's left over inside the garlic press, and I'm sorry, but that's just a lot of garlic. Like I'm gonna chop that up anyway. I just feel like that's a big waste of your product and your money. If you're buying something and people are, we're putting water into growing the product, and then you have to drag it out and chop it up anyway. It just sort of, this probably is also an old garlic press because it was given to me as like here, I don't use this, try it, and I thought it would be fun. I'll try a new one, and I'll reserve judgment. We'll see how that goes. All right, 2 tablespoons of anchovy paste. This is where a lot of the flavor, traditional Caesar dressing, comes from. You can start with 1 and then taste as you go. It is a very strong flavor. And if you are the kind of person who traditionally says no anchovies on your Caesar salad, then maybe start with the 1 tablespoon in your dressing and go from there. Because you can always just add a little bit more, but you cannot take it out once it's in there. You have to start all over again.
That would also be, if you're on a low sodium diet, that would be a great strategy because the anchovy paste is quite high in sodium. Worcestershire sauce, actually, I was surprised, really is not that high in sodium, nor is the Dijon mustard. So if you're real concerned about sodium, maybe cut back a little bit on the anchovy paste.
And the cheese. You can really go like light on the cheese, start with a smaller amount and then add a little bit more. Or that nutritional yeast has a really amazing way of mimicking the Parmesan flavor. So that's a great addition. I don't know much about the benefits though of nutritional yeast. Amy, do you have anything to say about that?
You know what? I don't know that much about it. I have used it before, and it does provide kind of a cheesy, nutty flavor, especially if you're trying to avoid animal products. But I know like Parmesan cheese has a pretty good supply. An ounce of it has about 34% of the RDI for calcium. I don't know if nutritional yeast has calcium supplemented back in. I could look it up and see.
Yeah, I never even really thought about it. It has it in the name, nutritional, but I was like, what is it even yeast? I know nothing about it at all, except that in vegan cooking, it is a great substitute for a lot of different sort of cheesy or nutty flavors. We use it when we make cashew cheese and all kinds of things. Okay, so I'm just whisking this together very, very well, and I'm going to taste it. That's the only way to know. A little Dijon-y and lemony. Oh, but I'm getting everything kind of at the end. That's nice. It's very thick though. I don't know if you can tell that, the consistency of it. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water because I don't want to add more lemon. I can already taste the lemon is very good. It's fresh and lemony, but so if I added more, it would make it totally imbalanced. So I'm going to just add water. Water is the perfect thing to use when you don't want to change the flavor of something, but you need to loosen it up or change the consistency. So I'm just going to sprinkle in maybe a tablespoon or 2 of water. And that is going to make it just the the viscosity that I want. This dressing, it's just yogurt, cheese, and anchovies, basically. A lot of lemon. That lemon will actually help preserve it. This will last in your fridge for like 3 or 4 days as a fresh dressing. Keep it in a jar, tightly closed. So if you don't need to, you can make small quantities of it. You can make little batches of it, and then it lasts. It's such an easy dressing. You can even just kind of make it from scratch if you want it. But this will last for the prep that I want throughout the week. Lots of salads. I really like to also toss up some of the veggies, some of the chopped romaine, maybe some chicken or the sausage if I want that. Toss it all together with a little bit of the dressing, wrap it up. I eat a lot of those like chicken Caesar wraps or sausage Caesar wraps or veggie Caesar wraps. It's one of my go-to lunches. It goes with you very well to go. Get nice whole wheat wraps, or if you have some of that naan bread, or if you use pita for the pizzas, you can even use that, make a little sandwich out of it. Really, really great option to use this Greek yogurt-based sauce instead of mayo, like on your sandwiches and things throughout the week. So you've got this dressing. You have got our rustic tomato sauce is done. I'm going to pull that over here. Our veggies in the oven I'm going to get out. Let me show you the sauce. Oh, here it's hot. Okay. Clean, dry towel. Bring this over. So I'm just going to pull out those stems. Big, thick stems. They added a lot of flavor, but we certainly don't want to scoop that out. I'm just kind of grabbing as many of the big ones as I can. Oh, if you could smell this, the basil and tomatoes are so fresh. So that's going to be really nice. Again, you can make pizzas, make breads, toss this with the sausages. I often just eat like a bowl of sauce, little sausage bites, roasted veggies, toss it all together with a lot of the tomato sauce and then some of that whole wheat bread. Since I got a whole loaf of it to make croutons, that bread goes a long way throughout the week. Get a really good whole grain rustic bread or something that you like, but with lots of good vitamins and nutrients to it. And then sandwiches or pizzas or different things, open face kinds of stuff, a lot is really great.
If you're kind of watching carbs, you might do, like she said, like a bowl of pasta sauce with veggies and a little bit of bread instead of noodles, right? Or maybe you want to do a whole wheat noodle and, maybe then you don't eat the bread. Or you could also do like a lentil pasta, which is going to be much higher in protein. You could do rice flour or rice flour pasta. Lentil pasta. So there's a lot of options if you're watching gluten or if you just want slightly higher protein.
Yeah, really good options, because then, if you're eating pasta, even if it's whole wheat pasta, if you're eating it every day, I start to feel a little heavy. I start to feel a little bit weighed down. It's not, if I'm not eating that for breakfast, it's hard to kind of burn all that energy sometimes. So just the bowl of veggies and sausage, different kind of pasta option. Those lentil pastas are really great, surprisingly delicious and just full of protein, like she said. So what you're looking for on the veg is a good high roast. I've got a good caramelization that happened on a lot of the zucchini that was in surface contact with the pan. Good sugars kind of cooked out to the surface, but none of them are completely broken down and slimy. And you don't want to let it turn to vegetable soup. Then it won't last throughout the week and you won't have really a very fun time eating it. So we're right at the end. Perfect. I mean, everything is kind of done. If anyone had any questions about the recipes or the items that we didn't cover, romaine, you can use any kind of salad greens throughout the week. Romaine is traditional for Caesar, which is why I recommended it, because it does go really well with a lot of these options. Making salad bowls throughout the week with any and all of these things on top, it's really awesome. But any lettuces would do. If you did get romaine, make sure that you wash it thoroughly. Even if it's the hearts that come in the bags, just go ahead and rinse it off a second time. I tend to chop it, then put it in my salad spinner, wash it up, dry it off really well, and then it's good to go for the whole week. There's not a lot of tricks to how you cut that. If anyone wants to have any demonstration about how to cut the lettuce, I'm happy to do that.
Julia, there was a question. You said the meal that your mom made, was that a frittata that you were saying?
Yeah. So it was just the marinara sauce on the bottom, whip up some eggs, like for our family, it was probably 8 eggs, and then a little bit of milk. Non-fat was always what we had in our house, so I'm sure that's what she used. And mozzarella cheese, because it kind of was like her, Italianized, and it's a low fat, low moisture mozzarella. Mix the cheese and the milk and the eggs together, pour that over the sauce in like a Pyrex casserole dish. Then you can add in any of these amazing roasted Italian veggies, some Italian sausage if you have that, or chicken, or anything else that you might want. And then bake it in the oven about 350 for, I would say probably 35 minutes. You want to make sure that no matter, all that you're looking for is that the egg right in the middle doesn't jiggle anymore. And like if you stick a toothpick in, you don't have any raw egg coming out, and you're done. And it's really good. And then you just kind of stir it and serve it hot. And yeah, it's like breakfast for dinner, but also dinner, and it's comforting and delicious. So you can do that also with salsa, and then sort of Southwestern style veggies and chicken, which is another weeknight classic in my family. So yeah, if you try any of those things, or if you try any of these things, please let us know how it turns out. If you have any questions that come up throughout the week, you don't hesitate to ask either Amy or I. We're here. And I hope you have a delicious week with all of your delicious, comforting, healthy Italian food. So thanks for staying a couple extra minutes. Thanks for being here again. I'm going to stop the recording.